What's up, everybody? Jensen Cummings here. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Today is Best Served Podcast 357. One of my favorite series. We have Meet the Team with Sarah Carpenter. As always, tell your best story. This is our best story, episode number 16 of the Tell Your Best Story series. I'm excited about Meet the Team because I get to spend so much time, hundreds and hundreds of times. I've gotten to interact with all of you, and there's so many people behind the scenes that are like actually making this thing happen, actually bringing the video cast and the clubhouse, and especially the articles. That's what we're going to be talking about a little bit today to life. And so I'm so humbled always and honored to be able to work with such amazing people, and count Sarah as one of those. So no further ado, Sarah Carpenter, come on in here. Sarah, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being a part of this best served thing, whatever the hell that means. Has been evolving, like everything has been evolving with the last year and a half or so since this thing started. And I'm just excited to introduce you to the audience because you're so instrumental in us being able to bring stories to life, and that's what we're here to do. So want to get a little bit of your background because you also have the hospitality background. Very interested, kind of you as a writer, as an editor, as a publisher, like how you think about that world. And then very specifically with the 86 challenge, your ability to help these writers from every level and every facet of the industry be able to bring those stories to the forefront, because that can be a big challenge, which we talk about a lot. So, but take us back a little bit. Kind of first job in the industry. When did you start? Like, give us a little bit of that origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. I am proud to say, even getting into the not only the publishing world, but also the food writing and food editing world in general, is before I even dipped into that, and even before I even dipped into writing, it all kind of started with working at restaurants. So, I grew up kind of all along South Federal, I guess, in the hood, so to speak, like if you could say that
Let's
for
go.
Denver. But and so yeah, I mean, starting at like age 13, I think it was, I was already needing a job. So my very first job ever working at a restaurant was at this little Mexican dive that was like snuck into King Super's little enclave called Burrito, and it was actually spelled BOW hyphen TEE hyphen ROE.
Sure.
Um, Eventually, towards the end, I asked the owners, I was like, why did you name it that? Like, why did you spell it out like that? And they're like, oh, we just wanted to make fun of white people. So I'm like, cool, awesome. Yeah, so it was a
Oh,
wild job. Yeah, I was responsible for dumping the grease bin outside, so that was a lot of fun.
wow.
And yeah, I'm pressure cooking the beans. They have fantastic beans, but they would throw this 13-year-old on the pressure cooker, and needless to say, I exploded them quite a few times.
The
Not
pressure
sure if I.
cooker and the grease, those are high hazard
Yes,
areas of the
yes,
kitchen. For sure,
yes,
for a 13-year-old. Well, I love hearing that. And then it progressed, right? And then you worked in some high-end restaurants, kind of up and down across the industry. Kind of what are big takeaways for you? Kind of knowing that hospitality life, the good, bad, the ugly, all of it. You've seen it all. What are some of the takeaways? Because I'm very interested in how you see and how you are connected to the industry. Because I think that shows when you're responsible for helping bring these stories from people in the industry kind of to life. And I think you have a lot of empathy and understanding of kind of their plight and where they've been, where they're at, and maybe where they're trying to go. So I'm interested in takeaways for you from your time in the hospitality industry.
yeah, absolutely. And yes, of course, it did progress from there, thankfully. Um, once I really got into college, I kind of left the burbs and was really excited just to get into downtown Denver. Was on a rare campus. Metro State, woo, is the whole idea of that whole campus is a commuter college. It's called the Roadrunners because even back in the day before they had the streets that went through, everybody going to college there would have to cross the road to get to all their jobs. And even when they started putting Lawrence and all those streets through so that it's one open campus, we're still being a road runner, running her all over town, you know, working our jobs and then going to night classes or whatever it
Well,
was.
like this
So
is like a little history of the development of
yeah,
downtown
there you
Denver.
go.
I like it.
Gonna throw it in, you know. So yeah, that was very much my life. I worked, you know, specifically at the market, rest in peace, throughout all of college.
I mean, that
And
that's an iconic Larimer Square restaurant. I'll tell you, that is the
yeah.
very first place when Betsy and I moved to Colorado. We
Oh
were staying in
wow.
Boulder at her brother's house up there, going and looking to find jobs. And the very first place that we went as like, let's go somewhere that's at the epicenter of Denver before we go to all these interviews that we had set up was the market.
Oh wow.
And right. And so I think a lot of people have that like history of connection to that. And you work there. I love hearing that. I love that
Oh my gosh.
we've intersected in different ways over the years. I think this is another really great way to like bring that together. So very cool.
It
The
is. I
market.
swear we've just been like walking by each other on the sidewalk or like restaurant, whatever it is the whole time. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, even when I've gone back to visit, I look at their little blue and white tiles, like trying to look for like the blood, sweat, and tears, like soaked in the creases, you know. But yeah, crazy job, just crazy stories, you know. But I paved my way through college with that. And then pretty much the idea was just to, you know, work at these restaurants all scattered all throughout downtown while I was chasing the writing dream and, you know, going to school for journalism and English and Spanish and different things like that. And so the idea was like, oh, okay, I'll just work these restaurant jobs and then I'm just going to land that, you know, writing job, no problem. Very much kind of, I feel like it's very much kind of how an actor goes out to LA, you know, and they keep doing all these auditions and commercials, and
Right.
it pretty much feels like that. But
Yeah.
so
Every
yeah,
server in Hollywood is actually an actor.
yeah, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
exactly, and vice
Mhm.
versa, yeah. So gosh, just dozens. I mean, really old school places, you know, like Sevilla that used to be in the pavilions, and Palomino and Pasquini's and the Galaxy Grill, which was then the Rhino Room, which is then in something else, and just some old school
Well, this is
haunts.
cool. I know old school Denverites are going to love this episode because that's a blast
Yes.
from the past. Somebody's like, I worked there. I remember so and so. Like, I think that's really great. There's so many memories tied to this, good and bad. What's something for you that you love about the hospitality industry?
Yeah, so well, a couple things. So kind of to spout off what I was kind of saying is that I relate very much to what Andrew was saying, I think in his stats that some 17% of industry people are only in the industry, you know, for the long run, and the rest of us are kind of doing something else. I
Mm-hmm.
very much thought I was, you know, that other percentage that I'm going to do something else. And it was just always a job. But what I love about the industry, from my personal experience anyway, is that that whole span that I just got done explaining was happened to be coincidentally over like the past 20 years that a lot of restaurateurs talk about it, a lot of Denverites of like this culinary boom that Denver went through from about the
Sure.
2000s until, you know, 2016, 2019, you know, I guess if you can still count the pandemic. So I think during my path, when I thought like, oh, okay, I'm just here for a job, the industry was evolving and growing up. And then I was growing up with it. I was literally being raised with it. And so the more interesting it became, the more stories that chefs had to say, the more
Mhm.
questions that diners were asking, then I was also asking those same questions. And I was back there in the kitchen, scribbling all kinds of notes with the chefs. Tell me the history about this, because I was mainly a server. So, you know, I would want to pull as many stories to then go back to my guests and then tell them those stories and, you know, just make their experience that much better. So that's just kind of like my time in the industry and how I grew up with it. But what I love about it for me is just, you know, even, you know, you can say like pandemic or not, is just for me, the industry has always been there for me. I think I took it for granted for a long time.
Mhm.
And I think very much exactly like a family, you know, you might grow up with a family that's dysfunctional, that elicits a little bit of trauma, but it's that family that raised you and taught you all the lessons in life and taught you how to clean and do your laundry and whatever. And you take that family for granted. You're like, you have no idea how much they taught you. And that's how much that was what the industry was for me, is that it's just always been there for me when I needed a job, when I was down and out. And for the longest time, I looked at it as that, as like, oh, okay, this is just the thing I'm going to lean on. And then probably, maybe about 2013, I'd say, then I suddenly kind of went over this cliff where I started becoming more engaged. The industry was getting more interesting. I was getting more interested in it. Diners were becoming more interested in it. So it wasn't just a job anymore. It was just this whole culture. And a lot of people had something to say. And then I realized I had something to say about it too. So then I really started integrating my writing into it, just my time and just what I was learning from these chefs. So, speed up to, maybe like 5 years ago or something, I'm kind of made full circle. After I was able to get out of the industry, I then found myself coming right back into it, but instead with an apron on, with like a pen and pad. And my biggest service at that time was, let me come back and let me pay my gratitude and give my thanks to, now that I've finally
Yeah,
appreciated and
respect.
realized, yeah, everything it's done for me. And let me start telling the stories about these chefs, about these dishwashers, about these bartenders and sommeliers, and how hard I know they work because I have seen it and they were my mentors, even if, it was different people. So that was the biggest thing. That was the way that, if I can just keep doing that for a while, the way I can say thank you for the past 20 years of them putting up with me. So
Yeah, I hear you there. And so now we've kind of spun that into finding new and different ways to find stories from within the industry. And the 86 challenge came about as an opportunity to say, well, can people tell their own story? Right. And I think so many people, the culinary narrative just doesn't fit them because it's not their experience, because there's 10 million people that are, at any given time part of this industry. And so we wanted to find a way to shift that, as well as be able to value the worth of them as individuals and their experience and stories. And something that you and I and all of us have talked about, like, there's not enough value in the whole ecosystem of food media. Like, even professional writers are not getting paid what it's worth to bring those stories to life. And so, like, there needs to be a shift in food media, just like there needs to be a shift in the restaurant industry. And so, we found each other again and said, let's work on this 86 challenge. You especially have been so proactive in like reaching out to the writers in this process and like trying to understand the words that they submitted in this article, sometimes and often clumsily composed together because they're not professional writers. Sometimes it felt like it was just a long Facebook post. Yet we found ways to bring these stories forward. And you were always wanting to reach out to them and find out, like, how can I help bring what the true story is to life through what you've written. So I'm just fascinated, and even highlight some of the struggles where people just like couldn't get the words out or couldn't like connect with them. I'm very fascinated, and I think so many people are, of like how we bring these stories to life through this challenge. So give us some insight there.
yeah, well, and I would say, as I say this for the purpose of the editing, not to toot my own horn, but as a practice editor and writer, the very first thing that I would say right off the bat, for certain, is that these these stories that were coming in, these industry members, I consider them all writers. I was absolutely blown away by every single
Me
story.
too.
I got tears in my eyes. I got goosebumps. A good editor, when they're first looking at the story, always reads it through top to bottom first. Like, put your red pen down. Just really absorb the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that every single, like the ones I edited and anyone else, I hope every member who submitted realizes that they are storytellers, that what they put on paper
Yes.
was epic. It was, to me, it was not a mess. It was never amateur. These people
Love it.
had something to say, and I think it's because they were, when you're speaking from your heart, when you're speaking from something that you're passionate about, and even something that was very difficult to go through, that is just a story. There's no need for really like an art and a craft. Like, that just comes out because
Yeah.
it's your experience. And I think that happened for every single person. And they were all so incredibly unique. At the same time, while I'm reading these stories, I'm relating to all of them, but they each story also showed me something, even though I'm like, yes, I've been through that experience. Each story showed me something that I just haven't quite thought of quite in that way before. And just the way they experienced it. Like, for example, like Camille's, she talks about food nostalgia. But so we all think of different things with food nostalgia, but she talks about it in a way of connecting to, certain moments or certain people and the way they did the presentation. There were different kind of, you know, sensory triggers for her
Yeah.
that took her to that place.
Yeah.
And then just I was entirely, there was another story about a writer and a chef who, went from settling in a state that was, a whole lot of work, which I also related to how that prompted, down the road to her cooking quiche. And then that went off into, a whole food blogging adventure.
Oh yeah, it starts
Um,
with quiche. I remember that. I remember so
yeah,
many
it
of
all
the
starts with
titles of
quiche.
these articles because
Yeah.
here's an interesting thing. I think this is part of what you're speaking to, which I'm so impressed that you picked up on this. It's like I first thought that we were doing something for people in the industry. Like we're going to come up with a way to bring stories out that nobody has ever asked to be a part of stories. So many of the writers first time ever writing anything, let alone a published article, let alone a paid article. And I was like, and we're going to shift the dollars and we're going to pay them $86 and we're going to create this like really interesting, unique model. And what I recognized getting to read every single one of those stories was like, they did something for us. Like I've been changed and moved like you have by these stories from such unexpected individuals who I'm just like humbled by the fact that they trusted us enough to bring this story out. We didn't do anything for them. They did something for us. We just held the space for that to happen. And I
Yeah.
do think that that's meaningful and valuable. So I like really appreciate that you're highlighting that. I want to take just a moment because one of the things is we want more and more and more voices added to the culinary narrative, that they all get to be a part of that story. And it's a challenge. So many of us have imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? Why would anybody want to read my story? Like, who would care about that? There's hundreds and hundreds of people I've interacted with who don't believe me at first, Sarah, when I'm like, I want to publish an article by you and I want to pay you. And
Yeah.
and that's hard. Speak to them for a moment. The people out there that are like, oh, I would love to write an article. I don't know how. I can't do it. I'm not a writer. I'm not this or that. Speak to them for just a moment because I think hearing from you, somebody who gets to interact with them and their story, would really help because I want them to hear it. I want them to go and start scribbling down whatever story is in them, and we will publish it.
Yes, so that's the magic ingredient we're working on, right? The magic recipe.
That's the unlock.
Um, yes. So, I mean, for me, I guess as a writer, that's what's tough is that the way I'm able to encourage other folks to tell their stories is just by devoting time. And I know not everybody always has that, but in the nature of a typical, journalism endeavor is that I'm actually going to visit someone in their setting and be able to sit down and talk to them and just hear them talk. They don't even have to write anything down. I'm doing all the notes, or maybe I have a recorder or something like that, and I'm able to tell the story with them. But but those same stories that they're telling, they are also capable, of sharing those as well. And of course, we have the blessing of multitude platforms. If they want to get on Clubhouse, share their story that way. They want to do it in a podcast if they want to write it,
Mhm.
But there is, of course, something special about having it written down. Maybe they can think of it in the way that you have recipes locked into a book. The more they're able to start writing down some of these stories, the more they're going to be able to kind of put them in a time capsule, and especially for the folks who have very heartfelt stories that they're cooking with recipes from their grandparents or their mother or whatever it is, like even more you want to hold those stories dear and be able to share those as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, I think it's just time. And I think it's just also just, I think it's being willing to, I guess, willing to open yourself up to the storytelling world. And what's funny is I know you and I both know this is that people are telling stories every single day. They talk with a friend, they say what happened, at the restaurant that day. They're all excited about the recipe. They're telling a story about how they got into this recipe and oh yeah, I traveled, to Tokyo and this is where I picked this up. I mean, we're always telling stories. So I think it's just getting comfortable and being willing to take that magic moment and just put it into something. And just all you're doing is just hopping from that conversation, into a blog post, into a podcast, whatever it might be, and just put it there. And I think just being willing to kind of not get the jitters of the medium and just saying, hey, I'm just
Right.
here to do the same thing I was just doing 5 minutes ago, talking about the special to my staff. But, something else really lit off for me. I watched that interview with you and Andrew again from about a month ago, where you were
Andrew
introducing
Parr
Andrew
on our
Parr.
team. Yeah. Yep.
When you were introducing Andrew Parr, you guys said something right towards the end. This was like a new light bulb that just happened within the past 24 hours. Um, you brought it, you were talking about labor shortage, which I know you've been talking about recently, and it's a whole other conversation. And it was very interesting, even in that particular time with introducing Andrew Parr. So you were getting towards the end of talking about labor shortage, and how ultimately, industry members do want to get back into the industry. And then both of you said something that was very important, that is this idea, which is, again, a whole other tangent conversation about the younger generation, the so-called millennials, that maybe get a lot of criticism for not wanting to work or not wanting to, climb the ladder to get to where they need to be and just put in the work. And you all said something where, if that is the case, whether it is or not, that we need to also, us who've been here, who've been experienced, we need to give them something to be inspired. And one way to do that is telling stories. And that was just huge to me, because I just spent some time with a chef friend. We went out to San Diego and ate too many tacos, and, just had a great time together. And this friend, he's currently going to culinary school, specifically to get his teaching license, but he's been in the industry for decades and has done it all. Executive chef, did some time in Vegas and Colorado. He's from Albuquerque initially. And I've been trying to get him to tell his stories too. And we were just talking about this a week ago, about him having a hard time, inspiring his students, really to put that work in. And I've been trying to also inspire him to tell his stories. And once you all said that in the conversation, immediately I wanted to go back to my chef friend in Albuquerque and be like, this is the way you inspire your students that you're teaching now and hope to still keep teaching in the next few years, is be willing to tell those stories. Tell them about, your grandmother's recipes. And I mean, he does all this amazing cooking, that he's learned from his grandmother out in Albuquerque. I'm like, tell those stories, or just tell something, like that is
Right.
the channel.
Any story.
Yeah.
Sarah, here's
Yeah.
here's two things I want to leave people with as we wrap this, that I think are really
Yeah.
important from what you just said. Number one, time. We use the excuse of I'm too busy, I don't have enough time, all the time. Yet your ability to tell your story equals your ability to feel valued in and of yourself, let alone within your community. And if you want to
Yeah.
get practical about it, your ability to tell your story equals more money in any given job, because the people who can tell the best stories are the most convincing, and the most convincing people are able to get what they need out of life. So tell that story. You
Yeah.
have time. You have time for whatever you commit to. I think that's super important. The second part is, sometimes we're trying too hard to grasp at the perfect story. Like, just tell me about the first place you ever had sushi at. Tell me
Yeah.
your favorite salmon dish to cook. Tell me about barbecuing with your dad. Like, any of those stories that are just a part of your life can be the story. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be a story that changes the world, yet enough little stories will change the world. So those two things
Yes.
I really appreciate from what you're saying. So Sarah, I love this. I cannot wait to do more work with you. I cannot wait to learn more from you. I'm so excited. Now I'm going to look up a couple of these restaurants that you mentioned, because I'm such a historian of food as well. I'm so fascinated in kind of how we got to this point. So everybody, Sarah Carpenter, just integral part of the team here at Best Served, and especially in helping us bring these 86 challenge stories to life. So Sarah, thank you so much.
Well, and then just thank you so much for, letting me be a part of the team. This is, it's absolutely motivated me and inspired me over the past year that I really needed. So I mean that, from the bottom of my heart. I mean, just plugging into anything you do any day, just completely just brings all the inspiration back. So I really
Let's
appreciate it.
go. I'm a good hype man. You hear that from me all the time. All right, Sarah,
That's
we're gonna let
right.
you go. Really appreciate you.
All right. Thank you so
Cheers.
much.
All right, everyone, that is it for this episode. So honored to be able to introduce you to Sarah Carpenter. Once again, Best Served Podcast 357. Meet the team. You've already met some of the team, and if you haven't, make sure you check out this series. Sophie, who you want to meet as well, we'll drop these links into the comments so you can kind of follow the full thread, and especially right now, meeting the editors of the 86 challenge. So important. These are storytellers that are really meaningful to us here at Best Served, but also to the industry at large. So thank you so much. You, right now, you're watching this, you're listening to this, scribble down your story. Whatever that story that you're telling right now, please do it. We will publish it. Cheers.